Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. The purpose of this video is to help you apply what you've learned about conjugating regular AR verbs in the present tense in Spanish. This video will also have a little bit of review at the beginning and then we'll get to the practice. So this is a super important topic. This will give you the most bang for your buck, if you will, in terms of a small investment in time, and you'll be able to do a lot with what you learn here. This will help you to be able to express your own unique thoughts in Spanish, as opposed to just having memorized and learned phrases and repeating them back. So this will help you to think on your feet if you know how to conjugate verbs. It's one of the most important topics that you can learn when you're just beginning another language. So remember, before you watch this video, before you continue, be sure you've studied the topic in your textbook. Remember that you can also Google conjugating regular AR verbs in the present tense, and there'll be a lot of great YouTube videos that talk about this. So do that first and then come here. So let's get started with the quick review. What is an infinitive? You have to know what an infinitive is before we continue. So grammatically speaking, in English, an infinitive is a verb with to in front of it. For example, to run, to eat, to work, to study, to play. These are all infinitives. And just what is an infinitive exactly? Well, an infinitive is a verb that hasn't been conjugated yet. When you conjugate a verb, you pick a subject and you put it in either the past, present, or future tense. Tense really just means time. You put it in the past, present, or future with the subject, and then it's conjugated. For example, if I say I work, I know I'm the subject and I'm doing it now. If I say I worked, I add the ed to it, well, you know I'm doing the action, but I did it in the past. Or I'm going to work, or I will work, or I shall work, well, then it's going to happen in the future. Okay, so that's just conjugating the verb. In Spanish, infinitives end in either AR, ER, or IR. There are no other infinitive endings. In English, it's just to plus the verb, but in Spanish, you have three possibilities. So hablar means to speak. Comer means to eat, and escribir means to write. Okay. So once you know what an infinitive is, then we can work on the conjugation. So some other examples of infinitives in Spanish, AR infinitives, because that's the topic of this video, is we're just working with AR infinitives right now. Hablar, to speak, caminar, to walk, estudiar, to study, trabajar, to work, ayudar, to help. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to conjugate all of these. And really, if you think about it mathematically, when you look at all the combinations of things that you can say once you know how to conjugate these, you're learning how to say hundreds of things here in this video. Okay, so here's the next part. Okay, if you understand what an infinitive is and you want to conjugate it, you have to learn endings that go with the subject pronouns that you already know. So for example, yo, when you conjugate a verb in the present tense, if you are the subject, in other words, I, the ending of the verb is always going to be o. So you remove the AR and you replace it with o. So for example, yo hablo, which means I speak. Tú, hablar, remove the AR and replace it with AS. Tú hablas, you speak. And so forth and so on. So, usted habla, you speak. Él habla, he speaks. Ella habla. Nosotros hablamos, we speak. Vosotros habláis, you speak or y'all speak. Ustedes hablan, you speak. Ellos hablan, they speak. Ellas hablan. Okay? So that's the basics of the conjugation. Here's a little bit of a repetition. Hablar is the infinitive. What you do is, if you want to conjugate it, remove the AR, and you're left with what we call the root. So this is the root of the verb hablar, H-A-B-L. And all I have to do is just add my ending to that depending on which subject I want to use. So for example, if my subject is yo, you learn that the ending is o, and this is something you just have to memorize this. You have to memorize it. There's no way of getting around it. Every Spanish speaker just memorizes these endings for AR verbs, and then they can communicate. So yo is my subject. I replace, I just put the ending on, which is the o. So yo hablo, I speak. Okay, so for yo, here it is. It's o. Yo hablo, I speak. Okay, so now that we know the mechanics of it, you know how to conjugate it, simply remove the AR and replace that with the ending that agrees with the subject that you want, and you've got it. Now you can conjugate AR verbs. Actually, you can conjugate really now thousands of verbs in Spanish. All you have to do is memorize the infinitives, and then you can start saying a lot of things in Spanish. Okay, so this is a typical type of exercise you might find in a textbook. You're given a prompt, you're giving pieces of information, and you have to put it all together in a grammatically correct sentence. So I have yo, I have the verb hablar, and I have inglés, which is English. So what you want to say here is I speak English. So how do you do that? Well, you just have to conjugate this, put it all together. Yo hablo inglés. Yo hablo inglés. The H is silent in hablar, by the way. Yo hablo inglés. I speak English. Another thing that we've talked about before is because of the ending of the verb, in other words, the o only goes with yo, that kind of renders the subject pronoun unnecessary. So you don't have to use the yo. So you can say just hablo inglés, I speak English. The yo is understood in this one. And most Spanish speakers will just leave out the yo because it's not necessary. So, hablo inglés, I speak English. Okay, let's try another one. Tu hablar, how would you say you speak? You speak. Tu hablas. You speak. Tu hablas. This is the informal you for someone that you know well. Okay, let's add another element to it. How would you say you speak Spanish? This is a statement. You speak Spanish. So telling someone that you know well, you speak Spanish. Tu hablas español. Tu hablas español. Now, for this one, it's very common that native speakers will also leave out the tu because the AS only goes with the subject, tu. So you might just hear, hablas español. Hablas español. You speak Spanish. He speaks. How would you say he speaks? ¿Cómo se dice he speaks? Él habla. He speaks. Let's add another element. He speaks Spanish. Él habla español. Él habla español. Remember the H is silent, so habla. Él habla español. How about the doctor speaks? Now, the doctor is not one of the subject pronouns. In other words, it's not a yo, a tú, usted, él, ella, nosotros, ustedes, ellos, ellas. But you have to think of which subject pronoun can represent el doctor. In other words, in English, I would say the doctor speaks. Well, instead of repeating the word doctor, I would say he speaks. So he would be the correct subject pronoun to replace doctor in this case. So you conjugate the verb according to that. So the doctor speaks would be el doctor habla. The doctor speaks. In other words, el doctor and the el are the same. And you'll get this form of the verb conjugated in the present tense. El doctor habla. The doctor speaks. So I want to say the doctor speaks Spanish. ¿Cómo se dice the doctor speaks Spanish? El doctor habla español. El doctor habla español. The doctor speaks Spanish. The patient speaks. ¿Cómo se dice the patient speaks? La paciente habla. La paciente habla. The patient speaks. The patient speaks Spanish. And this is a female patient, by the way. La paciente habla español. La paciente habla español. The patient speaks Spanish. Nosotros hablar. How do you say we speak? Nosotros hablamos. Nosotros hablamos. For this one, the AMOS only goes with nosotros or nosotras, so you can usually leave that out, and you can just say hablamos. Hablamos means we speak. They speak. ¿Cómo se dice they speak? Ellos hablan. Ellos hablan. They speak French. Francés es French. How do you say they speak French? Ellos hablan francés. Ellos hablan francés. Ellos hablan francés. They speak French. So here's a nice longer sentence. You see how you can build, once you know how to conjugate the verbs, the other elements you can build around that. So the nurses speak English and Spanish. The nurses speak English and Spanish. ¿Cómo se dice? The nurses speak English and Spanish. Las enfermeras hablan inglés y español. Las enfermeras hablan inglés y español. Otra vez. Las enfermeras hablan inglés y español. Okay, so now that you know how to do the conjugation, there's one more important aspect to conjugated verbs in the present tense in Spanish. When you conjugate a verb in the present tense, it actually has at least 3 meanings. So my question is, what does this mean? What does hablo inglés mean? You'll probably say, well, it means I speak English. And I will say, yes, it does mean that. That's correct. But a conjugated verb, again, a conjugated verb in the present tense can mean at least 3 things, depending on context. So hablo inglés can mean I speak English, but hablo inglés also means I do speak English, just depending on the context. So when would you use do? We call this the emphatic do. And we use do, the emphatic do in English, when somebody asks us a question in the negative. For example, if I were to say, well, you don't speak English, do you? I'm saying don't, right? It's negative. And you want to counter that by saying, well, no, I do speak English. I do speak English. We call that the emphatic do. So you can get the emphatic do in Spanish with what you know how to do already. So for example, if somebody asks you in Spanish, no hablas inglés? You don't speak English? You could counter that by saying, pues sí, hablo inglés. I do speak English. Okay. So it's the same thing as the English emphatic do. I am speaking English. Hablo inglés can also mean that if the context is right. For example, if I ask you, what are you doing right now? Well, you can say, well, I'm speaking English to so-and-so, right? In Spanish, you get that same meaning that it's happening right now with the present tense. So, pues hablo inglés. I'm speaking English. So this is important to realize that if you can conjugate a verb in the present tense, an AR verb, you can do it according to many subjects, like yo hablo, I speak, tú hablas, you speak, él habla, he speaks, ella habla, she speaks. But each one of those can also have the other 2 meanings. For example, él habla can mean he speaks, he does speak, or he is speaking. Nosotros hablamos can mean we speak, we do speak or we are speaking, just depending on the context. So that's what I mean by, what I meant by, at the beginning, I told you if you learn how to conjugate verbs, you're able to say a bunch of things, many things in Spanish now. Okay? Just a couple more examples and we'll wrap this up. The verb trabajar, to work. Yo trabajo can mean I work, I do work, or I am working, just depending on the context of the conversation. Yo camino. Caminar is to walk, so yo camino can mean I walk, I do walk, or I am walking. So once you realize that, then you've learned how to say a lot of things in Spanish now. Okay, so keep practicing. That's the end of this video. Remember, if you didn't get everything right before I showed you the answer, then go back to the beginning of the practice part and play it. Keep playing it until you get them all right, and then you've really learned something. Okay, well that's it for this video.